The call came at 3 a.m. My brother Kailan's voice trembled on the other end of the line, begging me to bail him out of county jail. Again. I rubbed my eyes, already mentally calculating how much of my savings would vanish this time. I'm Remy, and I've spent my entire life trying to be the responsible one. While that might sound admirable, in my family, it's made me the boring sister, the dependable one everyone calls in emergencies, but forgets to invite to celebrations. Please, Rem, Kylan's voice cracked. I messed up. I know I did, but I can't stay here another night. I sighed, already grabbing my keys. What happened this time? Bar fight. Some guy was harassing this girl and I stepped in. Things got out of hand. Of course they did. That was Kylan's specialty, getting involved in situations that got out of hand. But I had to admit, defending someone did sound better than his usual drunk and disorderly charges. The jail was exactly as depressing as you'd expect at this hour. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I counted out $5,000 in bail money, nearly everything I had left after putting a down payment on my condo last month. You're an angel, Rem, Kylan said when they finally released him. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, and his designer shirt was stained with what looked like dried blood. I swear I'll pay you back this time, every penny, like you paid me back the last 3 times. I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. He grabbed my hands, his green eyes wide with sincerity. I mean it. I just landed this amazing new job. First paycheck comes in next week. You'll be my first priority. I wanted to believe him. God, I always wanted to believe him. Mum and Dad don't need to know about this, he added quickly. They never do. I started walking toward the exit. Though maybe if they did, they'd finally see. See what? He caught up to me. That I'm not perfect? They'd just blame you somehow. You know how they are. He was right. Our parents had mastered the art of turning every one of Kilan's failures into someone else's fault, usually mine. Why hadn't I been watching out for him? Why hadn't I stopped him from going to that bar? You can crash at my place tonight, I offered, against my better judgment. But just tonight, back at my condo, I made up the couch while Kylan showered. Sophia, my best friend, had texted, "Tell me you didn't bail him out again." I didn't respond. Sophia had made her opinions about my brother crystal clear over the years. This place is really coming together, Kylan said, emerging from the bathroom in borrowed sweats. He wandered around my living room, picking up framed photos and knickknacks. You've done well for yourself, sis. No thanks to having to bail you out every few months, I muttered. He flopped onto the couch, running a hand through his damp hair. I know I've been a burden, but things are different now. This new job, it's going to change everything. I can feel it. I wanted to believe him. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe this time, my faith in him would finally pay off, and our parents would see that I'd been right to stand by him. Get some sleep, I said, heading to my room. We'll talk more in the morning. But when morning came, Kylan was gone. So was my laptop, my grandmother's antique ring, and the emergency cash I kept in my desk drawer. He'd even taken the spare key I'd stupidly left on the kitchen counter. My hand shook as I called his cell. Straight to voicemail, I called again. And again. You've reached Kylan. Leave a message. I sank to my kitchen floor, the cold tiles pressing against my legs. This wasn't happening. Not again. Not after everything I'd done for him. My phone buzzed, a text from Sophia. Check your online banking. With trembling fingers, I logged into my account. My savings account balance stared back at me. $12.47. He'd cleaned me out completely. Another text from Sophia. I'm coming over. Don't call your parents yet. But I already was, even knowing how this would play out. Mom answered on the third ring. Remy, it's barely 8 a.m. on a Saturday. Kylan stole from me, I blurted out. He took everything. There was a pause, then a sigh. Oh, honey, I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding. You know your brother would never... I hung up before she could finish. Tears burned in my eyes as I stared at my reflection in the blank TV screen. The responsible one. the dependable one, the fool who never learned. But something inside me had finally snapped. This time would be different. This time, I wasn't going to let it go. Sophia arrived with coffee and a determined look in her eyes. "We're filing a police report," she announced, setting the cups down on my kitchen counter. "You know I can't do that," I said, wrapping my hands around the warm cup. "He's my brother. He's a thief who just stole your life savings." Sophia pulled out her phone. "How much exactly did he take, including the bail money and what he took from my accounts?" "Almost 30,000. The number felt like a punch to the gut. "Jesus Christ, Remy." Sophia ran a hand through her dark hair. "That's it. We're going to your parents' house. Right now." I knew it wouldn't help, but I let her drive me there anyway. The familiar 2-story colonial looked exactly as it always had. Perfect lawn, perfect flowers, perfect facade, hiding all the dysfunction within. Mom opened the door before we could knock. "Oh, good, you've calmed down," she said, as if my earlier call had been nothing more than a childish tantrum. "Come in, both of you. I'm making brunch." Dad was in his usual spot at the kitchen table, reading his tablet. He barely looked up as we entered. "Mom, Dad," I started, my voice stronger than I felt. "Kylan stole $30,000 from me last night, after I bailed him out of jail." Dad finally looked up. "Jail? What happened?" Of course that's what he focused on. "Bar fight, apparently," I said. "But that's not the point. A bar fight?" Mom interrupted, cracking eggs into a bowl. "That doesn't sound like your brother at all. Are you sure you understood what happened?" Sophia made a disgusted sound beside me. "Mrs. Boyd, with all due respect, your son just committed grand theft against your daughter. That should be your concern right now." Mom's hand stilled. "I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding. Kylan would never steal. He probably just borrowed it for an investment opportunity. He's very business-minded, you know." "An investment opportunity?" I laughed, the sound harsh and unfamiliar. "He took my grandmother's ring. Was that for business too?" "Well, you should have kept it in a safer place," Dad said, as if that explained everything. I felt something inside me crack. "Are you serious right now? Your son, your precious golden boy, just stole everything I had, and you're blaming me for not hiding my belongings better." "Don't take that tone with us," Mom warned, pointing her whisk at me. "We raised you better than that." "Better than what? Better than telling the truth? Better than expecting my own parents to care when their daughter gets robbed?" Dad set down his tablet with a sharp click. "That's enough, Remy. Your brother is going through a difficult time. He's trying to find his path in life." "And I'm not," I shot back. "I work 60-hour weeks. I just bought my first home. I had savings, actual savings, until your son cleaned me out. But none of that matters because it's always about Kylan." "You've always been jealous of your brother," Mom said softly, shaking her head. "Ever since you were children. We hoped you'd grow out of it." Sophia stepped forward. "Okay, that's it. We're leaving. But first, when Kylan shows up here, because we all know he will, remember this conversation. Remember how you chose to protect a thief over your daughter." "He's family," Dad said firmly. "And what am I?" I whispered. The silence that followed was deafening. We were halfway to the door when my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered it, hoping against hope it was Kylan coming to his senses. Instead, my grandmother Gemma's voice crackled through the speaker. "Remy, dear, come see me, right now." "Grandma, I'm kind of in the middle of—" "Now, Remy." Her voice was steel. "There are things you need to know. Things that will explain everything." I looked at Sophia, who nodded. "Go. I'll drop you off." "What things?" I asked into the phone. "Things your parents never wanted you to know," Gemma replied. "About Kylan, about why they treat him the way they do, about why they've never been able to love you the way you deserve." My hand tightened on the phone. Behind me, I could hear Mom calling my name, probably ready to serve her perfect brunch and pretend nothing was wrong. As if my world hadn't just imploded. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, I told Gemma. As Sophia drove me away from my childhood home, I watched my parents grow smaller in the side mirror. They stood in the doorway, still perfect, still united, still choosing Kylan. But Gemma's words echoed in my head. Things you need to know. Things that will explain everything. For the first time since finding my empty apartment that morning, I felt something other than despair. I felt hope. Grandma Gemma's house smelled like cinnamon and secrets. She was waiting in her favorite armchair, a leather-bound photo album in her lap. Her silver hair was perfectly styled as always, but her hands trembled slightly as she gestured for me to sit. "Tea?" she asked, though a steaming cup already waited for me. "Grandma, what's going on? What do you know about Kylan?" She opened the album, flipping through pages until she reached a particular photograph. It showed my mother, much younger, standing beside a man I didn't recognize. "Your mother was 25 when this was taken," Gemma said quietly. "3 months pregnant with Kylan. The man beside her isn't your father." The room seemed to tilt sideways. "What?" "His name was James, a colleague of your mother's at the advertising agency. They had an affair that lasted nearly a year." Gemma's voice was steady, but her eyes were sad. "Your father never knew. Still doesn't." I stared at the photograph. The man, James, had Kylan's same green eyes, the same sharp jawline. "But how? Dad never suspected. Your mother discovered she was pregnant right after your father got his big promotion. The one that changed everything for them." Gemma took a sip of her tea. She chose security over truth. "James moved away, never knowing he had a son. Your father was so thrilled about the pregnancy he never questioned it. My hands were shaking so badly I had to set down my teacup. And you've known all this time. I caught them together once before she knew she was pregnant. She begged me not to tell. I agreed, thinking the affair would end naturally." Gemma's mouth tightened. "I never imagined she'd trap your father with another man's child." "But why are you telling me now?" "Because I've watched them destroy you trying to protect their secret." Gemma reached for my hand. "They've spent 30 years overcompensating with Kylan out of guilt. Every time they favor him, every time they excuse his behavior, it's because they're terrified of anyone questioning why he doesn't quite fit. And me," my voice cracked, "what about me? You're the child they actually made together, but loving you normally would mean treating you both equally. They couldn't risk the comparison." She squeezed my hand. "It was easier to push you away than face their lies." I pulled my hand back, standing abruptly. This is insane. You're telling me my entire life has been shaped by their guilt over a lie. There's more." Gemma stood, moving to her desk with surprising agility for her age. She returned with a yellowed bank document. "When your grandfather died, he left equal trusts for both his grandchildren. But there was a condition. The money could only go to biological descendants." My heart stopped. "What?" "Your parents have been secretly redirecting Kylan's portion to him through other means. They couldn't let him discover he had no claim to the money." She handed me the document. "Your portion is still there, untouched. They've been hiding its existence from you, claiming the trusts were dissolved years ago." I scanned the document, numbers jumping out at me, numbers with lots of zeros. "How much?" "Enough to change your life." Gemma's eyes glinted. "Enough to make them very, very nervous if the wrong questions were asked." I sank back into my chair, mind racing. "Does anyone else know?" "Just your mother's old lawyer, who helped arrange everything. He retired years ago." Gemma smiled slightly. "But he kept excellent records. Records I've been holding on to, waiting for the right moment." "Why now?" "Because you're finally angry enough to do something about it." She closed the photo album with a snap. "Your brother stole from you. Your parents dismissed it. But now you have something they can't dismiss. The truth." My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. "Please come home. We can talk about this rationally." I showed it to Gemma, who snorted. "Rationally? That's rich coming from a woman who's built her entire life on an irrational lie." "What should I do?" "That depends." Gemma leaned forward. "Do you want your money back, or do you want something more?" More? Justice, dear, recognition, the power to finally make them see you. I looked down at the trust document again, then at the photograph of my mother and the man who gave Kylan his green eyes. 30 years of favoritism, of gaslighting, of making me feel less than, all because they couldn't face their own lies. I want it all, I said finally. The money, the justice, the truth, everything they've kept from me. Gemma smiled, and for the first time, I saw where I got my strength from. Then let's make a plan. A family reunion? Sophia nearly choked on her coffee. That's your master plan. I spread the documents across my kitchen table, bank statements, trust paperwork, and the photograph Gemma had given me. Think about it. The whole family will be there. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all the people Mum and Dad have been lying to for years. And you're sure about this? Sophia picked up the trust document. Because once you do this, there's no going back. They're hosting it next Saturday. I pulled up the family group chat on my phone. Mum's already sent out the invitations. She's trying to smooth things over after what happened with Kylan. Speaking of your thieving brother, any word from him? Nothing. I started organizing the papers into a folder. But he'll show up. He never misses a chance to be the center of attention. The next week passed in a blur of preparation. Gemma introduced me to her lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Rachel who specialized in trust litigation. The money is legally yours, Rachel confirmed, reviewing the documents in her downtown office. We can file a petition to access it immediately, but that would tip your hand. I want to wait, I said, just until after Saturday. Rachel nodded. I'll have everything ready. Just say the word. Friday night, Mum called. You are coming tomorrow, aren't you, dear? The whole family's asking about you. Of course, Mum. I kept my voice light. Wouldn't miss it. And you're feeling better about everything? Much better. I thought about the folder sitting on my desk, loaded with 30 years of secrets. I've gained some perspective. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear. Sophia helped me dress, a crisp blue sundress that made me look professional and put together. You're sure you don't want me to come? This is something I need to do alone. I hugged her tight, but keep your phone on. The family was already gathering when I arrived. Aunt Linda's famous potato salad sat next to Uncle Mark's grilled chicken. Cousins chased each other around the backyard, while the adults clustered in groups catching up. Mum rushed over immediately. You came! She tried to hug me, but I stepped back. Where's Dad? Grilling with your uncles. She frowned at my movement. Honey, about last week. Later, Mum. I spotted Gemma arriving through the side gate. We'll talk later. The next hour was excruciating. I made small talk, picked at my food, and watched the door. Finally, right on cue, Kylan strolled in. Sorry I'm late, he announced, immediately drawing everyone's attention. Traffic was horrible. Mum and Dad flocked to him, all smiles and hugs. No mention of the theft, of course. No questions about where he'd been. I caught Gemma's eye across the yard. She nodded slightly. Actually, I said, raising my voice, I'm glad you're here, Kylan. I have something to share with everyone. The conversations quieted. Mom's smile faltered. Remy, Dad warned, this isn't the time. It's exactly the time. I pulled out the folder I'd been carrying. I recently learned some interesting family history, about trusts and secrets and lies. Mom went pale. Remy, please. Did you know Grandpa left trust funds for his grandchildren? I addressed the gathering crowd, but only for his biological grandchildren. Kylan frowned. What are you talking about? There weren't any trust funds. Actually, there were. I started passing out copies of the documents. Mum and Dad just didn't want anyone asking why you weren't eligible for yours. The backyard erupted in murmurs as people began reading. Aunt Linda gasped. Uncle Mark stopped grilling. You see, I continued, pulling out the photograph, Mum had a secret back in the day, a secret named James. Kylan snatched the photo, his face draining of color as he stared at the man who shared his eyes. That's enough, Dad shouted, but it was too late. Is this true? Aunt Linda demanded, waving the trust document. "Did you lie to all of us?" Mom was crying now. "We were trying to protect our family." "By stealing from your daughter," Gemma's voice cut through the chaos. "By favoring a child born of adultery over your own flesh and blood." Kylan looked like he might be sick. "Mom? Dad? What is this?" But our parents had no answers, only tears and stammered excuses as 30 years of deception crumbled around them. I walked over to Kylan, who was still staring at the photograph. "Now you know why they always protected you, why they excused everything you did, even stealing from me." He looked up, and for the first time in our lives, I saw real fear in his eyes. "The trust fund is mine," I said quietly. "All of it. And I'm done letting this family treat me like I'm worth less than you." The backyard had gone silent, waiting to see what would happen next. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years. "Now," I said, "let's talk about paying me back." "This is ridiculous," Kylan sputtered, trying to regain his composure. "You can't just show up and drop bombs like this. These documents could be fake." "Could they?" I turned to our mother. "Mom, want to tell everyone if they're fake?" Mom sank into a patio chair, mascara running down her cheeks. "I was young. I made a mistake." "The mistake wasn't the affair," Gemma cut in. "The mistake was lying to everyone for 30 years and punishing Remy for your guilt." Aunt Linda stepped forward, still clutching the documents. "All those times you told us Remy was difficult or jealous. You were just covering your tracks, weren't you? And the trust fund?" Uncle Mark joined in. "Dad left that money for his grandchildren. You had no right to hide it." Dad finally found his voice. "We did what we thought was best for this family." "Best for the family," I laughed. "You mean best for your reputation, best for your perfect son who isn't even yours." "Watch it," Kylan growled, stepping toward me. "Or what?" I met his gaze. "You'll steal from me again? Hard to do that when everyone knows what you really are." Our cousin Sarah, who'd always idolized Kylan, spoke up. "You stole from her." "It wasn't like that," Kylan protested. "I was going to pay it back." "With what money?" I pulled out my phone, showing the banking app. "You cleaned out my accounts. $30,000, Kylan. Plus Grandma's ring. Where is it?" He shifted uncomfortably. "I pawned it." The collective gasp from the family was audible. That ring had been a family heirloom. "Of course you did." I turned back to our parents. "And let me guess, you'll find a way to excuse that too?" "Remy, please." Mom stood up, reaching for me. "We can work this out privately, as a family. We stopped being a real family the moment you chose your lie over your daughter." I stepped back from her reach. Now everyone knows the truth. About Kalan's father, about the trust fund, about everything. "What do you want?" Dad's voice was desperate now. "Money? We can figure something out." "I want what's legally mine." I nodded toward Gemma, who pulled out her phone. "My lawyer is ready to file the paperwork for the trust, unless you'd prefer to handle this through the courts." Mom went even paler. "The courts? Fraud is a serious crime," Gemma said calmly, "especially when it involves trust funds." Kylan suddenly lunged forward, grabbing my arm. "You can't do this to me, to us." Several relatives moved to intervene, but I held up my hand. "Actually, I can, and I will. Unless what?" He released my arm. "Unless you sign a repayment agreement for everything you stole, with interest." "I don't have that kind of money." "Then I guess you better find it," I smiled sweetly. "I'm sure Mom and Dad will help." They always do, don't they? The backyard had become a theatre, with relatives watching the drama unfold like a live soap opera. Some were filming on their phones, others whispering among themselves. "And what about us?" Dad gestured between himself and Mom. "What do you want from us?" "I want you to admit what you did, to everyone. No more lies, no more excuses." I looked around at our assembled family. "I want them all to know exactly who you are and what you've done." Mom broke down completely then, sobbing into her hands. Dad looked lost, his perfect family facade crumbling before his eyes. Kylan stared at the photograph of his real father again. Did you ever plan to tell me? We wanted to protect you, Mum whispered. Protect him, I scoffed. You enabled him. You turned him into this because you couldn't face your own guilt. Aunt Linda started gathering her things. I think we should go. Clearly, this family has a lot to work through. Other relatives followed suit, but not before giving me supportive hugs or whispering quick apologies for never seeing the truth before. As the backyard emptied, I turned to my parents one last time. My lawyer will be in touch about the trust fund, and Kylan, I faced my brother, or whatever he was to me now. You have 30 days to start paying me back, or I'll press charges for theft. You wouldn't, he challenged, but his voice wavered. Try me. I gathered my things, ready to leave. I'm not the pushover you all thought I was. Not anymore. Gemma linked her arm through mine as we walked toward the gate. Behind us, I could hear Mom's sobs, Dad's attempts to comfort her, and Kylan's angry demands for more answers. But for the first time in my life, their drama wasn't my problem. Ready to go? Gemma asked. I nodded, stepping into the sunlight. Ready for whatever comes next. 3 days after the reunion, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Relatives I hadn't heard from in years suddenly wanted to check in. Mum called hourly until I blocked her number. Dad sent lengthy emails that I deleted without reading. Sophia sat across from me at our favorite coffee shop, scrolling through the family group chat she'd been added to by my cousin Sarah. Your Aunt Linda is going off. Apparently, she's demanding your mum step down from organizing the annual charity gala. The one Mom's been running for 15 years? I sipped my latte. That's got to hurt. Serves her right. Sophia looked up. Heads up, incoming. I turned to see Kylan pushing through the coffee shop door, looking considerably less polished than usual. His designer clothes were wrinkled, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. We need to talk, he said, pulling up a chair without asking. About your repayment plan. Great. My lawyer drafted an agreement. About everything. He ran his hands through his unkempt hair. I found him, James, my real father. That got my attention. How? Facebook. Wasn't hard. He lives in Seattle now. Kylan's voice cracked. He had no idea I existed. When I called him... You called him? Yesterday. He's flying in tomorrow. Kylan laughed bitterly. Turns out he always wanted kids. Mum told him she'd had a miscarriage. Sophia whistled low. Your mum's really going for gold in the lying Olympics. I know I screwed up, Kylan said, ignoring her. The money, the ring, I was desperate. This business opportunity came up. Save it, I cut him off. I don't care about your excuses. Do you have my money or not? He pulled out an envelope. 5,000. It's all I could get together so far. And the ring? He looked down. I can't get it back. The pawn shop already sold it. The last piece of my grandmother, gone forever. I took a slow breath. Then you better find a way to pay me its value. That ring was worth 12,000. 12,000? He went pale. Remy, please, I'm trying here. Trying wouldn't have been necessary if you hadn't stolen from me in the first place. I took the envelope. 25,000 to go, plus interest. Mum and Dad can't help anymore, he blurted out. The family's freezing them out. Dad's partners at the firm are calling for a review of his position. Mum's lost half her charity board. Sounds like karma to me, Sophia muttered. My phone buzzed. A text from Gemma. Your trust fund paperwork is filed. Meeting with the bank tomorrow at 10. Look, I told Kylan, standing up. You made your choices. Now you get to live with them. Just like Mum and Dad get to live with theirs. They're still our parents, he protested. Are they? Because it seems like everything I knew about our family was a lie. I gathered my things. Figure out how to pay me back, Kylan. That's all I care about now. What about James? He grabbed my arm as I turned to leave. Don't you want to meet him? He's technically your... I don't know what he is to you. He's nothing to me. I pulled free. Just like you're nothing to me anymore. Sophia followed me out, leaving Kylan sitting alone with his $5,000 in cash and a lifetime of lies unraveling around him. That was intense, she said as we walked to my car. You okay? Before I could answer, I spotted Mum across the street, getting out of her car. Remy, she called out, please, just talk to me. You should go, I told Sophia. This isn't going to be pretty. Mum hurried across the street, ignoring the honking cars. I've been trying to reach you for days. I blocked your number for a reason. I know you're angry, she said, reaching for me, but we're still family. We can fix this. Fix what exactly? I stepped back. The 30 years of lies, the way you treated me, the fact that you let your golden boy steal from me and did nothing. I'm your mother. No, I said quietly. You're just the woman who gave birth to me, and then spent my entire life punishing me for not being him. Tears filled her eyes. That's not true. I love you. Maybe you do. But not enough to be honest. Not enough to protect me. Not enough to be a real mother. A crowd was gathering, people stopping to watch the drama unfold on the sidewalk. James is coming tomorrow, she whispered. Please, don't let him destroy what's left of our family. I laughed, the sound harsh and cold. You destroyed this family all by yourself, Mom. I just exposed the wreckage. I got in my car, leaving her crying on the sidewalk. In my rearview mirror, I saw Kylan emerge from the coffee shop, watching me drive away. Some families, I realized, aren't worth saving. The bank meeting was brief but life-changing. As I signed the final documents transferring the trust fund into my name, the banker smiled. Congratulations, Ms. Remy. You now have access to your full inheritance of $850,000. I nearly dropped my pen. I'm sorry, what? With compound interest over 30 years, she explained, the original amount has grown significantly. Outside the bank, I called Gemma. Did you know? About the amount? Of course. I could hear her smile. Your grandfather was a smart investor. He wanted his grandchildren taken care of. Children, I corrected, not grandchildren, just me. Just you, she agreed, the rightful heir. My phone buzzed with another call, Dad this time. I almost declined it, but something made me answer. James is here, he said without preamble. He wants to meet you. I told Keelan. Please, Dad's voice cracked. Just come to the house, one last time. I found myself driving there against my better judgment. Sophia's words echoed in my head. You don't owe them anything. But maybe I owed myself closure. The house was quiet when I arrived. In the living room, Mom sat rigid on the couch beside Dad. Kylan paced by the window, and in the armchair sat a man I'd only seen in photographs. Older now, but with those same green eyes. James stood when I entered. You must be Remy. Must I? I remained by the door. I'm not sure who I am in this family anymore. Remy, Mom started, but James held up his hand. Let me speak, Edith. He turned back to me. I want you to know I had no idea. About Kylan, about any of it. If I had... You'd have what? I asked. Swooped in and saved us all. Changed the last 30 years. Maybe. He shrugged. We'll never know. But I'm here now, trying to understand. Kylan stopped pacing. He wants to make things right. Right? I laughed. There is no making this right. Mom lied to everyone. Dad lived in denial. You stole from me. And now what? We're supposed to have some big happy family reunion because biological dad showed up. We were trying to protect, Mom began. If you say protect this family one more time, I swear to God. I took a deep breath. The trust fund cleared today. Do you want to know how much money you kept from me? Dad flinched. Remy, please. $850,000. I watched their faces pale. That's what your lies cost me. That's what you gave to him instead. James stepped forward. I have money too. I want to help. I don't want your money, I shouted. I don't want anything from any of you. Don't you get it? This isn't about money anymore. It's about 30 years of making me feel worthless because you couldn't face your own mistakes. The room fell silent. Outside, a lawnmower droned. Someone's kid laughed. Normal life going on while my world kept shattering. I filed a police report this morning, I said quietly. About the theft. Kylan stumbled back. You wouldn't. I warned you, 30 days to start repaying me. You gave me $5,000 and excuses. I pulled out my phone, showing them the police report number. The detective is very interested in the pattern of family cover-ups. We can fix this, Mom pleaded. James can help with the money. It's not about the money. I turned to James. You seem like a nice man. Maybe you would have been a better father than the one I got. But I don't need a father anymore. I don't need any of you. Remy, Keelan stepped toward me. You're my sister. No, I said softly. I'm not. I'm just the person you stole from. The one who finally stopped letting this family treat her like she didn't matter. I walked to the door, then paused. The detective will be in touch, Kylan. Mom, Dad, I'm sure the country club will love this latest scandal. And James? I met those familiar green eyes. I hope you find whatever you're looking for, but it's not here. As I drove away, my phone exploded with messages. I ignored them all, except one from Gemma. Come over, I made pie. In my rearview mirror, I could see them all spilling onto the front porch. The parents who failed me, the brother who wasn't my brother, and the father who came too late. But ahead of me lay something better. Freedom, truth, and the knowledge that I'd finally stopped letting their lies define my worth. Sometimes, I realized, the best revenge isn't just exposing the truth, it's walking away and letting karma do the rest. Gemma's kitchen window offered a perfect view of the moving truck in my parents' driveway. We watched as workers carried out boxes and furniture while sharing her famous apple pie. The firm asked Dad to retire early, I said, cutting another slice. Apparently, fraud allegations and family scandals are bad for business. And your mother? Lost her position at the charity. They're downsizing to a condo. I smiled. Karma's been busy. My phone buzzed. A text from the detective. K. Boyd turned himself in this morning. Wants to make a deal. Good, Gemma said when I showed her. About time he faced consequences. Sophia burst through the back door, waving a newspaper. Have you seen this? The Society page headline read, Prominent families fall from grace, fraud, theft, and hidden heirs exposed. Mum must be devastated, I said, but found I didn't care anymore. Any word from James? Left town yesterday, Sophia reported, stealing a bite of my pie. Apparently finding out your long-lost son is a thief wasn't the heartwarming reunion he hoped for. The doorbell rang. Gemma answered it, returning with a small package. It's from that detective. Inside was my grandmother's ring, still beautiful despite everything. A note read, Recovered from pawn shop. Owner cooperated when charges were mentioned. I slipped it on, feeling whole again. Think they'll ever forgive me? Forgive you? Gemma scoffed. For what? Telling the truth? For destroying their perfect family image. They destroyed that themselves, Sophia said firmly. You just stopped covering for them. My phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. Hello? Ms. Remy? A woman's professional voice. This is Andrea from Riverside Publishing. We received your manuscript submission. I put the phone on speaker as she continued. Your story about family secrets and redemption. We'd like to offer you a contract. After the call ended, Sophia squealed and hugged me. A book deal, see? Everything really does happen for a reason. Speaking of reasons, Gemma pulled out an envelope. I have something for you. Inside was a key and a deed. What's this? This house, she said simply. I'm moving to that beachfront condo I've always wanted, and I want you to have this place. A real home with real family memories. Gemma, I can't. You can, and you will. She squeezed my hand. It's time this house belonged to someone who understands the value of truth. Through the window, I watched my parents supervising the movers, looking small and defeated. Mom glanced up, catching my eye. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then she turned away, and I felt the last thread of our old relationship snap. The detective says Kylan's agreed to full restitution, Sophia read from her phone. Plus community service. Think he'll actually change? Does it matter? She grabbed more pie. You've got your money, your ring, a book deal, and now a house. You won. But it didn't feel like winning. It felt like finally being free. The moving truck pulled away, taking with it 30 years of lies and pretense. Mum and Dad got into their car without looking back. You know what this place needs? Sophia gestured around Gemma's. No, my kitchen. A housewarming party, with only people who actually care about you. First, Gemma held up her fork. We need to talk about your book. I have some stories about your mother's childhood that would make excellent chapters. My phone buzzed one last time, an email from Dad. I'm sorry we failed you. I'm sorry I failed you. Someday I hope you'll let me try to be the father you deserved. I deleted it without responding. Maybe someday I'd be ready for their apologies. But today was about moving forward, not looking back. So, I said, reaching for the coffee pot. About those stories. Gemma's eyes twinkled. Well, there was this one time your mother tried to run away with the gardener's son. As laughter filled the kitchen, real, genuine laughter, I realized something. Family isn't about blood or secrets or lies. It's about the people who stand by you when the truth comes out. The ones who help you pick up the pieces and build something better. Sophia and Gemma kept talking, their voices warm and real in my new kitchen. Outside, the moving truck disappeared around the corner, taking my old life with it. Good riddance, I thought, and cut another slice of pie. Sometimes the happy ending isn't about forgiveness or reconciliation. Sometimes it's about letting go and finding out who you really are when you're finally completely free.
My brother generously invited us to stay at his home without charging us for rent or utilities. I handle finances for a living, and my husband, Stephen, is a mechanic. We reside in the house where I was raised, a property that holds a special place in my family's history. Originally, it served as the headquarters for my father's business. It was anticipated that my brother would take over the family business, prompting him to pursue a degree in economics, including further studies at Oxford University. After gaining substantial knowledge there, he returned to New York, U.S., and joined my father in running the business. When our parents decided to retire and relocate, they handed the business to my brother and gifted me the house. Stephen and I chose to make it our home. Conveniently located near public transportation, shops, hospitals, and schools, the house is ideally situated. It suits our current needs perfectly and will continue to do so even after our children move out. We feel profoundly grateful to my parents for this gift, and we were looking forward to our future in this home. However, not long after settling in, our peace was disrupted by frequent visits from my mother-in-law. She often inquired about my parents' finances, given their history as business owners. Her questions like, Angela, how much money do your parents have? And what will you inherit when they pass? Made me uncomfortable. I tried to deflect her curiosity by saying that I hadn't given it much thought and that the house might be the extent of any inheritance. Despite my attempts to dismiss the topic, she persisted, insinuating that my parents must have discussed their financial plans with me. Her interest seemed rooted in expectations of gaining something from their wealth, even though I was clear about what I would inherit. This situation created an unexpected tension and made me uneasy about her motives. I chose not to share my concerns with my husband, who is particularly close to his mother, hoping to avoid any further complications. However, an utterly unexpected event unfolded that completely took me by surprise. It was a holiday morning, just about 7 a.m. when our doorbell rang unexpectedly. Upon opening the door, I was greeted by a mover, which left me both shocked and confused. Before I could gather my thoughts, my mother-in-law, along with my brother-in-law's family, arrived announcing they were moving in. The smirks on their faces sent a chill through me. My husband, awakening to the commotion, seemed undisturbed by the situation. When I questioned him, he simply asked, "What's the problem?" He pointed out that our house had plenty of space for everyone, as if it were perfectly normal for them to just move in. The surprises kept coming when my sister-in-law declared that they had been invited by my brother. She explained cheerfully that they wouldn't need to pay for rent or utilities and were looking forward to our hospitality. Meanwhile, my brother-in-law began to intrusively inspect the rooms, deciding aloud which he preferred based on the sunlight, and instructing Stephen to clear out our belongings. As this surreal scenario unfolded, I felt a sense of vertigo from the shock. This was our home, yet they were behaving as if they owned the place, opening doors and staking claims to rooms. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law had been quite overbearing for some time, with my sister-in-law even rummaging through my bag without permission on previous occasions. Their audacious behavior continued to encroach on my personal space, and my patience wore thin. This was the last straw. Frustrated and assertive, I finally stood my ground. "This is my house," I declared. "Why are you acting as if you own it? I've had enough. I want everyone to leave." The time had come to reclaim my space and restore peace to our home. I'm usually quite composed and not one to raise my voice, but watching these people take over the house my parents had entrusted to me, acting as if they owned it, pushed me to my limits. That's why I lost my temper and shouted at all three of them. However, the situation escalated unexpectedly when one of them retorted, "How dare you talk to us like that? You're the one who should leave." Shortly after, I felt a sharp sting on my cheek. It took me a moment to realize I had been slapped. I was in shock, my cheek throbbing painfully. In that instant, something inside me just broke. Living with people capable of such disrespect was unthinkable. But this house was mine, and I wouldn't let them treat it like a free hostel. So, I made the difficult decision to leave temporarily. I quickly packed some essentials and found a monthly rental apartment to stay in for the time being. This meant I would have to commute to work, but it seemed the only viable option at that moment. Once settled, I called my parents to explain the ordeal. Even through the phone, I could feel their outrage. My father, who has always balanced his roles as a strict CEO and a loving father brilliantly, was particularly upset. I hated bringing them into this mess, especially just as they were enjoying their retirement, but I was left with no choice as my rightful home was being encroached upon. While I was adjusting to life in the rental apartment, I was certain that my husband and his family were getting comfortable in my house. Motivated by suggestions from my brother and father, I decided it was time to take further action. A few days later, during a break at work, I checked my phone and saw dozens of missed calls and messages from my husband. I knew exactly why he was trying to reach me. It was time to address this situation head on. But this time, I would be prepared and not alone in my fight to reclaim what was rightfully mine. In response to the untenable situation at home, I decided to take a firm step by contacting the utility companies to disconnect the electricity and water services to the house. Our home is entirely dependent on electricity. Without it, nothing functions. We hadn't installed solar panels yet, so there was no alternative power source. Given the current heat wave, I imagine living without these basic amenities would be quite difficult. This action likely prompted the flurry of calls from my husband, who was probably trying to manage the sudden lack of utilities. Just as I was about to dismiss another call from him, he rang again during my break. "Hey, what's going on? There's no power and the water isn't running. Did you cut off the electricity and water?" His voice was tinged with panic. I felt that since the house was mine and I was no longer living there, it didn't make sense to continue paying for utilities I wasn't using. The house belongs to me, and now that I'm not there, it wouldn't be sensible to keep the electricity and water running, I explained. Keeping these services active would mean I'd have to cover the bills, which didn't seem fair under the circumstances. When I shared my reasoning, my husband became very upset and demanded that I turn the services back on immediately. However, Just because he wanted them reinstated didn't mean I was obliged to comply. I told him if they want the utilities back, they should pay for them themselves. Every time we discussed finances, they insisted that since it was my house, I should bear the costs, but their actions spoke differently. I had no intention of renewing the utility contracts or asking them to vacate the house immediately. After making my stance clear, I ended the call as my break was finishing. Later, my mother-in-law, sister-in-law, and brother-in-law all reached out with similar requests, complaining about the unbearable heat and inconvenience caused by the lack of water. They wanted me to reconnect the utilities, but my decision was firm. This was a matter of principle and a step towards asserting my boundaries within my property. After hearing their complaints, I firmly told them to handle the situation themselves and hung up the phone. I suspected they were just being opportunistic, hoping I would cave and they could continue living comfortably at my expense. However, even after a week, there was no sign of them leaving. Realizing I needed to take more decisive action, I consulted with a lawyer from my father's company. I explained the situation and requested that he send a formal notice to my husband, accusing them of trespassing. They had entered and occupied my house without permission, essentially forcing me out and treating it as their own. I made it clear in the notice that I was seriously considering legal action. This move shocked my husband, who, surprised and anxious about the legal implications, approached me hoping to find a resolution. Aware of their concern for their social reputation, I knew the threat of a lawsuit would be a significant stressor for them. Despite their desire to maintain their lifestyle, they were now caught in a dilemma between facing legal consequences and convincing me to let them stay. I could see through my husband's intentions clearly, but I refused to listen to their pleas and did not relent to his requests. In a moment of frustration, my husband exploded in anger during a call at his workplace, demanding that I drop the lawyer and accusing me of acting self-righteous. Despite his loud outburst, I remained calm and unaffected, simply annoyed by his audacity to claim rights over my property. No matter how much he protested, my stance was firm. If they continued to squat in my house, legal action was inevitable. I ended the call, feeling that engaging further would be a waste of time. I had already discussed potential divorce proceedings with my lawyer. Upon returning home later, I found missed calls from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, but decided not to engage further and blocked their numbers to avoid any more disruptions. The threat of legal action and the looming possibility of a lawsuit proved too much for my husband's prideful family. Realizing their position was indefensible, they packed their bags and left the house. With the lawyer's assistance, the divorce negotiations proceeded smoothly. I arranged for a professional cleaning service to refresh the house. Finally, after living separately in a monthly rental, nothing compared to the comfort of returning to my own, now sparkling clean home. The peace and autonomy I regained made all the efforts worthwhile, reaffirming my decision to stand up for my rights and reclaim my space. After moving back into my house, I realized it needed some updates and repairs in several areas. I discussed this with my father, who connected me with a trustworthy contractor. We started planning the renovations, which was an exciting project that marked a new beginning in my comfortably solitary life. Living alone brought a sense of freedom that was both exhilarating and soothing. I could relax on my sofa without critique, eat whatever I fancied without comments, and just enjoy the peace. However, this tranquility was interrupted when I started receiving calls from an unknown number, 5 months into my newfound solitude. Initially, I assumed it was the contractor and ignored the calls, but they kept coming. Eventually, I answered, only to discover it was my ex-husband, whom I had recently divorced with a strict agreement brokered by our lawyers to never contact each other again. Confused and annoyed by his breach of our agreement, especially since he had changed his number to make this call, I demanded to know why he was contacting me. Ignoring my questions, He pleaded desperately for me to listen. Despite my reluctance, he proceeded to explain his situation. His company was undergoing a severe financial crisis, resulting in a significant salary cut. Additionally, his mother's health was deteriorating, making her unable to work, and his sister-in-law and her husband were also in a financial bind due to unstable employment. Most of her earnings were being used to cover her husband's debts. With the salary reduction, my ex-husband and his family were struggling severely to make ends meet. Hearing all this did little to stir my empathy. The memories of how they had forcefully barged into my home, assumed control without my permission, and even attempted to push me out were still fresh. Their previous actions, filled with disregard and disrespect, made it hard for me to feel anything but disbelief at their current plight. I told him that his current difficulties were his to manage and reminded him of our legal agreement to cease contact. As I ended the call, all I could think was how unbelievable it was that people who had treated me so poorly expected any sympathy or help from me now. I listened, devoid of sympathy, as my ex-husband described their dire circumstances. "We're in serious trouble. We might not be able to pay our rent or even buy food tomorrow. We used to be a family, right? Please help us," he pleaded, his voice breaking with emotion. Yet his words did nothing to sway my resolve. I remembered all too well my struggles and how, when I needed support, he did nothing to help. He, along with my mother-in-law, had always looked down on me. My sister-in-law and brother-in-law joined in too, mocking my appearance and my traditional views without a care for my feelings. My mother-in-law not only exacerbated situations but also pressured me relentlessly to have a child, pushing herbal concoctions on me, booking unnecessary medical appointments, and even spreading harmful rumors among our neighbors about my ability to conceive. Reflecting on these memories, it was clear there was not a single redeeming period in my marriage. Once kind and supportive, my ex-husband had transformed into a mere puppet under his mother's influence post-wedding. I recalled a particularly vivid incident where, returning from an appointment, I learned my mother-in-law had visited our home, cried to my husband about wanting to befriend me, but then slandered me at every opportunity. Whether at home or in public, my sister-in-law and brother-in-law would ridicule me, laughing cruelly at my expense. With such a past, how could I entertain the idea of helping them now? "No matter what you say, my feelings remain unchanged. I cannot help you," I asserted firmly. I was resolute not to allow their current plight to drag me back into a cycle of manipulation and disrespect. "I'm going to hang up now, and please never contact me again." With that, I ended the call and immediately blocked the new number. Knowing my ex-husband's persistence, he might try to change his number and reach out again, but I was prepared to maintain my boundaries firmly shut against any further attempts from him or his family to draw me back into their troubles. Over the weekend, I planned to change my phone number at the store to avoid further harassment, but before I could do so, my ex-husband and his family broke the agreement established through our lawyers. Unexpectedly, they showed up at my house around 10 p.m., banging on the door and yelling, "Open up! Let us in and take care of us. We're family. You should help us." Their loud voices disrupted the peaceful night without any regard for the late hour or the disturbance they were causing the neighbors. Rather than confront them directly, I attempted to communicate through the intercom, urging them to go home and stop causing a scene. However, they ignored my pleas and continued to bang on the door, creating quite a commotion. Overwhelmed by their reckless behavior, I was on the verge of calling the police when I heard sirens approaching. It turned out a neighbor had already alerted the authorities. Seeing the police, my ex-husband and his companions panicked, mistakenly thinking I had called the officers. They tried to flee, but with a crowd of onlookers gathered, escape was not an option. The police swiftly intervened, escorting them to the station. I provided a full account of the events to the police, explaining the situation and their unwarranted intrusion. The incident quickly became the talk of the neighborhood, and word spread even to my ex-husband's workplace through a coworker who witnessed the scene. Already facing financial difficulties due to a salary cut, the public ordeal and police involvement were the final blows to his professional life. His employer decided to let him go. With no job and unable to afford his apartment rent, tensions escalated within his family, leading to the collapse of their shared living arrangement. My ex-husband Stephen, along with his mother, now resides in public housing. Both are working multiple part-time jobs, striving to make ends meet, with even his mother eager to contribute financially to their reduced circumstances. Hello, my name is Natalie, and I'm a 38-year-old woman. These past few months have been a challenging period for me as I've found myself having to relearn many aspects of my life. Much of the difficulty I faced can be traced back to my husband, Willie, but thankfully, a compassionate individual stepped in and saved me from further distress. Let me share with you the people involved in my journey. First, there's my sister, Lori. She's 5 years younger than me and strikingly beautiful. During our childhood, we often clashed because I was the quintessential nerd and she was the star of her social circles. She tended to tease me, and there seemed to be an underlying jealousy driving her actions. Our mother tried to bridge the gap between us, but it was to little avail. Our communication dwindled when I went off to college. However, as I entered adulthood and Lori reached her late teens, we began to reconnect. Over time, our relationship improved slightly, though it never became particularly close. Despite this, I came to accept the level of connection we achieved. Now, regarding my ex-husband Willie, we initially met at work and quickly hit it off. After dating for 4 years, we decided to get married. Together, we purchased our first home. Since I was the higher earner, the mortgage and house deed were in my name. A couple of years into our marriage, Willie broached the topic of starting a family. He approached it gently, hoping I'd keep an open mind. "Honey, I've been thinking," Willie began. "We've been together for a while now, and maybe it's time we thought about having a family of our own." I knew this conversation was coming. "Willie, you know my reservations," I responded. He nodded. "I understand, but think about it. We're stable, and it could be wonderful to see many versions of us running around." I sighed. "Yes, but raising children is a massive commitment and responsibility." Willie smiled. "And who is more hardworking and responsible than us?" This brief overview captures the essence of my current life situation and the people who have played significant roles in it. Despite my reservations about starting a family, I found myself giving in to Willie's persistent requests. We first welcomed a son, and 4 years later, a daughter into our lives. Initially, Willie was a supportive partner, but it wasn't long before the dynamic drastically shifted. Suddenly, the full weight of our home life, including the care of our children, fell on my shoulders. After our first child was born, Willie's career leaped forward with a promotion, and he began to out-earn me. He suggested I leave my job to focus on our family. I was reluctant, but the ongoing pressure made me relent, and I settled into my new role as a full-time parent. To stave off boredom and maintain a connection to the outside world, I started hosting dinner parties. These gatherings became a cherished part of my routine, often including my mother, sister Lori, and my mother-in-law Amanda, especially when she was in town. This new chapter of my life brought its comforts. I cherished the extra time with my children and the visits from family members. My relationship with Willie seemed stable, even though a traumatic birthing experience with our second child had left deep scars, affecting how we related to each other. However, just when I thought I had adjusted, a disturbing discovery shattered my sense of stability. One day, while tidying up our bedroom, I found a pair of women's underwear that definitely were not mine. The sight of them made my heart drop with a mix of shock and sadness. Had I become insufficient for Willie? The timing was particularly painful. I was still in the throes of recovery from our second child's birth, Not even a year passed and was seeing a therapist to work through my postpartum challenges. Despite making slow progress, the realization that Willie might be unfaithful felt like a massive setback. Filled with a mixture of anger and betrayal, I needed answers. I snapped a photo of the underwear and sent it to Willie, asking for an explanation. Then, I turned to his laptop, logging into his social media accounts to sift through his messages. At first glance, there was nothing out of the ordinary. No unfamiliar names popped up, which only deepened my confusion and suspicion. As I continued to dig through his digital life, I braced myself for what I might find next. In a haze of desperation, I scoured through Willie's chats, digging into every conversation despite knowing deep down that it seemed unlikely to uncover anything from the familiar names that popped up. However, the constant recurrence of my sister Lori's contact ID in his chats initially didn't alarm me. Why would it? My sister and husband communicating shouldn't inherently raise suspicions, but a gut feeling pushed me to delve deeper, and what I discovered left me reeling. Their messages were filled with intimate photos, affectionate videos, and declarations of love. They even discussed plans for Willie to leave me. The betrayal by my sister was a shock that turned my stomach. Our relationship had its ups and downs, but I never imagined she could hurt me like this. Overcome with nausea from the disgust and betrayal, I attempted to confront Willie, but he didn't pick up his phone. So I called Lori. "Hey, what's up?" she answered casually. "Don't hey, what's up me, Lori? Seriously, what's wrong with you?" My voice trembled with anger and disbelief. Confused, she replied, "I don't know what you mean." "Well, I found a pair of your panties in my bedroom. Have you been sleeping with Willie?" My voice cracked as I spoke the words. Her response was chillingly nonchalant. "Yeah, for a while now, why?" "Seriously, Lori, you thought it was okay to sleep with my husband? Did you think I was boring? And being my sister didn't make you think twice?" She had a bizarre justification ready. "Look, I thought I was helping you out. I was keeping Willie busy so you could focus on the kids." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Are you serious? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Why would you help tear our family apart? I just want what's best for Willie, okay? If I'm the best for him, then so be it." Her words were like a slap in the face. "You're disgusting," I spat out and hung up, unable to fathom her audacity. Alone and devastated, I lay in bed, tears streaming down my face as I grappled with the magnitude of the betrayal from the people closest to me. I never imagined my life would unravel like this. As I dealt with the fallout of my discovery, I had to push my emotions aside. My youngest daughter needed me. She woke up crying that night, and as I comforted her, I felt numb, mechanically moving through our routines without really being present. Throughout the day, I kept my distress hidden from my children. They didn't need to carry the weight of adult problems. I picked up my older child from school, prepared dinner, and answered their innocent questions about their dad's whereabouts, with a fabricated story of him working late. As the evening wore on, my initial anger shifted to concern. It was nearing 10 p.m., and there was still no sign of Willie. I called him repeatedly, but he didn't answer. Desperation led me to dial my sister, but she too remained unreachable. Exhausted and overwhelmed, I finally fell asleep, clinging to a sliver of hope that this was all just a nightmare. Morning brought a harsh reality. Willie's absence was glaringly obvious. His belongings were missing from our bedroom. A quick check confirmed my worst fears. Most of his things were gone from our home. He had left in the night without a word, without any attempt at closure. Stunned and heartbroken, I knew I had to prioritize my children. I got them ready, dropped the eldest off at school, and took my youngest to my mother's house. My mom immediately sensed that something was amiss, given my distant demeanor. I struggled to keep up the facade as the morning progressed. The thought of raising 2 children on my own loomed large, and every time I snapped back to reality, the enormity of the situation weighed heavily on me. Eventually, my mother's patience wore thin. Okay, I've had enough of your silence. What's going on? She pressed. Gathering my courage, I started from where it all began. Well, I found out Willie has been cheating on me. Her shock was palpable. What? How do you know? I sighed, the words heavy on my tongue. I found another woman's underwear in our bedroom. As I recounted the details, the conversation opened a floodgate of emotions I'd been holding back, marking the start of a new, uncertain chapter. When I confronted Willie about the unfamiliar underwear, he didn't respond and then he just left. He left? What do you mean? My mom asked, bewildered. When I woke up this morning, all his things were gone, I explained, the disbelief still fresh. I didn't even have a chance to stop him. I fell asleep around midnight, and when I woke up, he had taken everything. Oh my God, my poor girl, I'm so sorry this happened, my mom exclaimed, her voice filled with sorrow. It gets worse, I continued, hesitating as I prepared to reveal the full extent of the betrayal. Oh no, what happened? Do you know who Willie cheated on you with? She asked, a sense of urgency in her voice. You mean, do you know who he cheated with? I corrected gently. Yeah, I snooped through his things to find out. I normally wouldn't invade someone's privacy like this, but I had to know. So, who is it? She inquired anxiously. It's Lori, I said, the words tasting bitter as they left my mouth. Excuse me, what? Are you serious? She gasped, shock painting her features. Yes, my sister. I called her to ask about it, and she was so casual about it, I continued, my voice shaky. She said they were in love and believed she was the best for him, so she was going to keep being with him. Oh my God, what has Lori done? My mom lamented, shaking her head in disbelief. I don't even know how you're going to get through this. You have 2 kids to raise, and now you need to find a job too. Look, why don't we just get some rest while I try to process this? I'll be here to help you, okay? She offered, her tone reassuring. Yeah, okay. Thanks, Mom, I agreed, feeling a bit relieved to have her support. Despite the chaos, telling my mom wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. I ended up sleeping while she took care of my youngest. When I woke up, I heard my baby crying and my mom yelling. I rushed out and saw her on the phone looking angry. She hung up and seemed surprised to see me. I'm sorry about the noise, she apologized, but didn't elaborate further. I knew she had been giving Lori a piece of her mind. Over the next few days, Mom stayed with us. It was easier to manage with one person moving in rather than 3. Lori kept trying to contact our mom, but she asked me to block Lori on her behalf. It was comforting to have someone who understood my feelings and stood by my side through this turmoil. During a particularly lonely period, I learned from mutual friends that Willie and Lori had hastily married. The news broke just a day after Willie had deserted us. Our friends, concerned and puzzled by the sudden developments, reached out. Sharing the details of the betrayal was humiliating, but their response brought some solace. They supported me wholeheartedly, choosing to cut ties with both Willie and Lori. It was painful to digest the fact that they had moved on so quickly, but perhaps I shouldn't have expected anything less, given their previous actions. When I relayed this to my mom, her fury was palpable. Normally a pillar of calm, seeing her so incensed by my sister's actions underscored the gravity of the betrayal. It was comforting, however, to have her unwavering support, not just emotionally but financially as well. She went above and beyond, assisting me in securing job interviews to help regain my financial independence now that Willie was no longer there to hinder my career. Managing day-to-day life with the kids was challenging but feasible. The hardest part was masking my sorrow when they inquired about their father. Despite the struggle, we persevered. About a week after Willie's departure, I received a letter from him. By then, my heart had hardened enough that I wanted nothing to do with his words, presumed apologies, or excuses. A week was far too long for him to reach out, especially after such a profound abandonment. In a moment of resolute anger, I burned the letter, a symbolic gesture of closing that chapter of my life. However, in quieter moments, curiosity gnawed at me. Part of me regretted not reading his words, wondering if there was any explanation that could make sense of the chaos he'd left behind. Sometimes I wished I had read the letter before consigning it to the flames, if only to know what he had attempted to say. Yet the decision was made, and I had to live with not knowing, focusing instead on rebuilding and moving forward for the sake of my children and myself. Amidst the turmoil, I often had to remind myself that nothing Willie could have written in that letter would alter my feelings toward him or undo the damage he caused. The next day, to lift our spirits, my mom and I took the kids to the fair. It was refreshing to immerse ourselves in the lively atmosphere, allowing ourselves to enjoy the moment and laugh, a welcome reprieve from the recent hardships. That evening, as we relaxed with a bottle of wine, I mentioned the letter to my mom. "Something came in the mail for me last night," I began. "Oh, what was it?" she inquired, her curiosity piqued. "It was a letter from Willie," I replied. "What did it say?" she asked, expecting that I had read it. "I don't know. I didn't open it," I confessed. "You didn't open it, but why not?" "I just didn't want to deal with anything he had to say, so I burned it," I explained, perhaps more casually than I felt. "You burned it?" "Natalie, what if it was something important like divorce papers?" "The envelope didn't look official at all. I'm pretty sure it wasn't that," I reassured her. "Well, if you're sure, what do you think was in it?" she pondered aloud. "Maybe a weak apology, or perhaps he wanted his stuff back." "I wouldn't be surprised," I speculated, trying to dismiss the nagging thoughts about its contents. "But how are you feeling about all of this now?" She shifted the focus back to my well-being. "Today was a good day. It's tough, especially when the kids keep asking about their dad." "What do I even tell them?" I admitted, the weight of the situation momentarily clouding the day's joy. "It's slowly getting better, but only a little," I added. "As long as it's improving, I'm always here for you, and just so you know, I'm planning to cut ties with your sister. Everything I have will go to you and the kids," she stated firmly. "Oh, Mom, that means a lot. But are you sure? Lori is still your daughter," I reminded her, recognizing the magnitude of her decision. "I know you and Lori had your differences, but what she did is unforgivable. I raised both of you better than this, and Lori didn't care," she said resolutely. "She's no longer my daughter in my eyes." It was a harsh stance, and while I understood her position, I knew how difficult it must have been for her to arrive at this decision. Lori was still her child, and disowning one's child is a heart-wrenching choice to make. I felt a mix of gratitude and sadness, knowing the depth of my mother's support and the painful sacrifices it entailed. The thought of ever disowning my own children was unimaginable, and it only made me appreciate my mom's support even more. She was willing to make such a difficult decision for my sake, which filled me with gratitude. 5 days later, a sudden knock on my door interrupted the quiet routine I had settled into. I wasn't expecting anyone, and with my mom at work, visitors were a rarity. With caution, I opened the door just a crack to see 2 men dressed in black suits standing on my porch. "Can I help you?" I asked, peering out. "We're lawyers, and we have something for you," one of them replied, extending a note and then a check towards me. I cautiously accepted both, my eyes widening as I glanced at the check. It was made out to me for $920,000. Stunned, I stammered, "There must be some mistake." "There's no mistake," they assured me, urging me to read the note. The note began with the words, "Thank you for saving me." As I read further, I discovered it was from Amanda, my mother-in-law. She had tried to visit 5 days prior but found no one at home. When she called Willie, he implied that he couldn't access the house because I had changed the locks. Sensing that something was off, Amanda pressed Willie until he confessed everything. Appalled by her son's behavior, Amanda decided to write me and her grandchildren into her will. In her note, she expressed her gratitude for my actions, which prevented her from entrusting her assets to Willie. She had been terminally ill and, unfortunately, passed away just the day before. Her final wish was to ensure that her daughter-in-law and grandchildren were well looked after. Tears streamed down my face as I absorbed the contents of the note. Amanda's unexpected kindness and the profound loss of such a supportive figure overwhelmed me. It was a bittersweet moment, realizing the extent of her faith in me and the magnitude of her final gesture. Amanda was an exceptional woman, known for her integrity and fearless spirit. This trait often put Willie on edge, but to me, it was a source of immense comfort. She remained steadfast, offering her unwavering support right until the end. Not long after Amanda's passing, Willie reached out over the phone. I expected an attempt at reconciliation, but I chose to listen nonetheless. "What's this all about?" he blurted out, wasting no time. "You need to be more specific," I countered, maintaining a calm demeanor. "Why weren't you at the house when I asked? I sent you a letter instructing you to act normally during my mother's visit." "Oh, that was in the letter. I never read it," I admitted. "You burned it? You've ruined everything. Mom was supposed to help with her estate, but you've taken everything for yourself," he accused sharply. "That's quite hypocritical, Willie. You left us, and now you only reach out because of money. Love isn't something you can manipulate. I acted in my best interest, and clearly, so did your mother by protecting us. Please don't contact me or the children again," I responded, ending the call with a firm resolve. Following that conversation, I swiftly moved to legalize our separation. The divorce proceedings were straightforward and custody of our children was awarded solely to me. Willie attempted to challenge Amanda's will, hoping to claim a portion of the inheritance, but her documents clearly favored me, leaving him unsuccessful. Willie and Lori continued to badger me, hoping I'd relent and share the inheritance, but I stood firm in my decision to refuse them. With the financial security the inheritance provided, I was able to allocate funds for my children's future education and invest wisely to ensure our stability. This also allowed my mother to retire comfortably, and I returned to the workforce. As the kids adjust to the new normal without their father, I plan to share the full story when they're mature enough to understand. Although there's still pain from the events that unfolded, I'm optimistic about what lies ahead. The future holds promise, and I am confident that better days are on the horizon. I'm currently facing a difficult situation that revolves around my family's expectations and financial disagreements within my marriage. It seems that my chance to inherit what I rightfully deserve is fading, overshadowed by my husband and his mother's relentless chase for wealth in our marriage. You might think that inheriting something from your own family would be straightforward, but for me, it's becoming a distant dream. Both my husband and his mother are intensely focused on money, their greed reaching the point where they even lay claim to my late father's hard-earned legacy, a thought that I find absolutely unforgivable. Every day, my resolve only grows stronger. I am determined not to give in to their excessive greed. Let me introduce myself. I am Diana, a 40-year-old woman who has been navigating through a 14-year marriage, juggling family duties and a demanding job. My husband, Henry, 42, works at a supermarket near the station, a place where our lives first intersected during my university days. We started dating casually when I was working part-time at that very supermarket, eventually getting married when I was 23. Our family now includes our son, Liam, who has just started his university journey this spring. While I am committed to fulfilling my responsibilities, there is a troubling undercurrent in my life: Henry's reckless spending habits. Although he has the right to spend our hard-earned money, his constant demands for more funds combined with a lack of transparency have only made our financial situation worse. When it comes to financial discussions, especially in front of his parents, the atmosphere turns into a battleground. My stand against their endless demands often leads to strong opposition from them. Tensions always seem to rise when my son Liam's grandparents visit, a sentiment Liam wholeheartedly shares, often choosing to stay away when they come around. However, Liam recently dropped a bombshell that added even more stress to an already strained situation. He caught his father being unfaithful. This revelation left me more heartbroken than furious, yet Liam's support gave me the strength to consider confronting my husband before making any major decisions. As I was gathering my thoughts on how to address this delicate issue, an unexpected situation arose. My husband and his parents unexpectedly showed up in our living room. What appeared to be a casual visit quickly escalated when my husband suggested we all go on an expensive trip to Hawaii, casually mentioning that he needed $8,000 for the plan. My frustration boiled over, and I seized the moment to confront them, not only about their relentless financial demands, but also about my husband's betrayal. The room fell silent as the gravity of my accusation sunk in. When I confronted my husband about his infidelity, he initially denied everything, questioning the need for proof and defending his innocence. I countered by telling him that he had been seen entering a hotel with another woman. He tried to discredit the witness, our own son, which made me pause, not wanting to drag Liam into a messy confrontation. To my astonishment, my mother-in-law downplayed the seriousness of the infidelity, suggesting that such behavior is typical and should be overlooked in men. I was appalled that she, a woman herself, could dismiss such behavior so lightly. Despite the emotional turmoil, the conversation quickly turned back to their financial request for the Hawaii trip, as if the personal betrayal was just a minor distraction. Frustrated with the ongoing financial disputes and the lack of moral sensitivity from my husband, I reached the point where I knew it was time to end our marriage. In a calm but firm voice, I declared that we were going to divorce. In retaliation, my husband immediately threatened to claim my parents' mansion as part of the property division if we proceeded with the separation. As our argument intensified, my cell phone rang, providing a brief interruption to the heated moment. It was my uncle, my father's brother, with distressing news. My father had collapsed and was unconscious, rushed to the hospital by ambulance. I quickly explained the urgent situation to my husband and his parents before rushing to the hospital. Upon arrival, I was relieved that my father was stable, though not in the best of health. At 62, he had spent his life dedicated to our family business, working tirelessly to ensure we had a comfortable life. The news of his sudden health crisis deeply shook me, forcing me to consider his irreplaceable role in my life. A few days later, my father regained consciousness, which alleviated some of my immediate worries. During a visit with my son Liam, we shared a moment filled with both relief and concern. However, a subsequent call from the doctor confirmed the severity of my father's condition, exacerbated by years of overwork. Tragically, he passed away not long after, and I was enveloped in grief. Throughout this challenging time, Liam remained my steadfast source of support. As an only child, I took on the responsibility of organizing the funeral, a task made even more difficult by my husband's indifference. At the funeral, my in-laws showed up, superficially expressing admiration for the family home and displaying a tactless curiosity about its value. After the memorial services, as I struggled to come to terms with my father's passing, my in-laws paid us an unexpected visit. Despite the circumstances, their attention was unfortunately focused more on the materialistic aspects, with my mother-in-law particularly fixated on the grandeur of the house, underscoring their ongoing insensitivity and materialism in the face of our family's loss. As I was grappling with my grief and putting away funeral attire, I received a call that my parents were unexpectedly on their way to visit. Confused and a bit anxious, I couldn't help but wonder why they were coming. My apprehension grew as I braced for another conversation, likely centered around financial issues. Resolute to understand their intentions, I prepared to have a meaningful conversation upon their arrival. As they walked in, the mood shifted. My in-laws, who had tagged along, settled onto the sofa with satisfied grins. The tension thickened when my husband, out of the blue, suggested we move out of our spacious house and proposed that his parents move in with us in a new home. Shocked by this suggestion, I reaffirmed my decision to proceed with the divorce, a choice driven by the need to manage my late father's affairs. My husband, ignoring the matters of his infidelity and our impending divorce, nonchalantly insisted that everything we owned, including my inheritance, should be shared between us as spouses. This bold claim, assuming entitlement to all my inheritance, infuriated me. Meanwhile, his parents casually discussed their room preferences in the potential new mansion, further aggravating my frustration. Determined to protect the legacy that my father had worked so hard to build, I vowed never to let them have their way. The audacity of my husband and his parents, treating my father's house and wealth as if it were rightfully theirs, had stretched my patience to its limits. A few days later, amidst these tumultuous events, I received a call from my uncle. His comforting words and support reassured me that I was handling the situation well despite the overwhelming challenges. The conversation with my uncle took an unexpected turn when he mentioned he had some urgent news to share, prompting us to arrange a meeting that very night. As he revealed shocking details about my husband and his parents, I was stunned by the gravity of the information. Determined to find a way forward, I confided in him about the outrageous demands and claims made by my in-laws. Outraged by their boldness, my uncle reassured me that he would help manage the situation. Curious about his approach, I eagerly met with him the next day, this time bringing along my son, Liam. The plan was to enlighten Liam about the true nature of his father and grandparents and to prepare him for the difficult times ahead. Armed with this new strategy, I called my in-laws over for a discussion about potentially all 6 of us living together in my family home. The proposal seemed to catch everyone off guard, but after they realized we were serious, my mother-in-law quickly warmed up to the idea, excited at the prospect of living in what she called a dreamlike mansion. However, the excitement was short-lived. Reality hit when my father-in-law brought up the cancellation fee for their previously planned trip, demanding reimbursement. Their unabashed self-interest was glaring, and I was appalled by their audacity. Yet, my mother-in-law, unfazed, assured everyone that they would manage the finances soon enough, brushing aside any immediate concerns. Having dealt with my husband and in-laws' relentless pursuit of money for so long, I had become somewhat numb to their schemes. But this time their sheer selfishness struck a deeper chord, reminding me of the challenging road ahead and standing up to their manipulative tactics. However, Liam, who wasn't used to their blatant and greedy behavior, was clearly upset and angered by their audacity. To comfort him, I gently patted his shoulder and assured him that we would manage the situation together. As the conversation continued about the possibility of moving into my family home, I decided to play along, fully aware that their expectations were far from reality. Henry, my husband, probed into the logistics of the move, his tone unusually sharp. Trying to ease the tension, I explained that Liam and I would head over first to get the house ready, emphasizing that it was a substantial task and we needed to start early. However, Henry expressed doubt about Liam's ability to handle such responsibilities, given his student status. I skillfully steered the conversation, assuring him that Liam was more than capable of managing his tasks, although Henry remained somewhat skeptical over trivial issues. Despite the tension, my mother-in-law was cheerfully oblivious to the undercurrents. The conversation soon drifted to the size of the mansion and the number of rooms, which seemed to excite her. Seizing this chance, I told them they could choose their rooms first and even suggested a gradual approach to cleaning and organizing, considering my busy work schedule. My measured responses served to temporarily satisfy their expectations, leaving them pleased with what they perceived as a victory. In my mind, I harbored a plan to challenge their presumptions and bring their lofty expectations back to earth. The moving day was scheduled a month later, giving me some time to strategize and perhaps change the course of events to better align with reality and fairness. I was filled with a mix of anticipation and determination as the decisive day approached, the day when my husband and in-laws were expected to arrive with a moving truck, believing they were about to take possession of what they thought was their new home. Liam and I stood at the front entrance, ready to meet them. Ignoring my husband's attempts at humor, I noticed the sparkles of excitement in my in-laws' eyes, oblivious to the fact that their illusions were about to be shattered. As the gate swung open, my uncle, my father's brother, stepped out of the house. His presence was silent yet imposing. He confronted my husband and in-laws, leaving them puzzled. It was clear that my husband barely remembered my uncle from the funeral. Setting the record straight, my uncle asserted his ownership of the house and clarified the details of the inheritance distribution. The shock on my husband and in-laws' faces was evident as they came to terms with the gravity of their misunderstanding. Despite my uncle's assertive explanations, my husband tried to remain calm, seemingly attempting to gloss over the confrontation. However, the tension escalated when Liam stepped in, accusing his father of infidelity. This revelation left my husband visibly shaken and exposed, unable to deny the truth his son had unveiled about him being seen entering a hotel with another woman, a suspicion I had harbored, which was now confirmed. When confronted, my husband adamantly denied the accusations, refusing to admit to his wrongdoings. Liam, distressed by his father's actions and their impact on our family, urged his father to leave our lives for good. Despite this emotional plea, my in-laws were still primarily focused on financial matters, insisting on a formal division of property. Their relentless pursuit of financial gain starkly contrasted with the emotional turmoil our family was experiencing, highlighting their indifference to the personal pain they were causing. When my in-laws declared that they had given up their apartment and quit their jobs to indulge in a leisurely life at what they assumed would be the family mansion, I was left utterly astonished. It was even more shocking when they disclosed that both my husband and father-in-law had resigned from their jobs, planning to rely solely on what they believed would be their share of my father's inheritance. Bewildered by their rash decisions and presumptuous expectations, I stood firm, asserting my rightful claim as my father's child and anticipating a fair division of his substantial property. Fortunately, my uncle, who is also a lawyer, stepped in to manage the legal aspects. He revealed my husband's infidelity, backed by solid evidence gathered from a month-long investigation. This disclosure stunned my husband and his parents, making them finally realize the gravity of their miscalculations. With my uncle's guidance, I informed them that any further discussions would need to be handled legally and demanded that they never contact me again. Despite a brief hostile look from my husband, they left without further incident, and I expressed deep gratitude to my uncle for his crucial support. Following the legal proceedings, my son Liam and I moved into the family home, fulfilling the wishes of my father and grandfather. I felt a profound sense of gratitude for this opportunity to live in a house filled with cherished memories. Liam, inspired by his uncle's example, dedicated himself to his studies with the goal of becoming a successful lawyer. Meanwhile, my ex-husband and his parents faced tough times struggling to find new jobs and settling into an old apartment. The repercussions of their actions began to unfold as my ex-husband, now financially strained, reached out for help. However, having completely severed ties, I declined to provide any financial support, reinforcing our estrangement. As my ex-husband tried to adjust to his new reality with part-time and day jobs, their earlier scheme to finance a non-existent luxury trip unraveled further, exposing the extent of their deceit. Relieved of these burdens, I focused on my career, eagerly looking forward to seeing Liam graduate from college, proud of overcoming such significant challenges and starting anew. On the day we were scheduled to embark on our honeymoon, I was shocked when Terry handed me divorce papers. He told me he planned to take his entire family on what was supposed to be our romantic getaway and suggested that if I didn't agree with the arrangement, we could part ways. Although I was seething with anger internally, I calmly responded, "That's fine, but remember, I'm still my person." His surprised expression gave me a sense of victory. My name is Lauren, and I'm a 38-year-old who works in real estate. I find my job fulfilling and am grateful for the support of my colleagues. Despite my professional success, my personal life is quite simple. I don't have many hobbies and have never been in a relationship until recently. As I watched friends pair off and marry by their 30s, I couldn't help feeling left behind. To add to the pressure, I noticed younger colleagues frequently leaving our company, which always pained me. Then I met Terry through a mutual friend. He was 3 years my junior, with a comforting smile that always made me feel safe and valued. Terry was a man of few words, preferring to listen rather than dominate conversations. He respected my opinions, making me feel involved and important in decision-making, which was new to me given my lack of romantic experiences. I quickly grew fond of him, and our relationship blossomed. When the topic of marriage came up, Terry's simple agreement to proceed felt natural. Marriage meant making numerous decisions together, from planning the wedding and honeymoon to choosing our future home. It was supposed to be one of life's significant milestones, and I was eager to navigate it with him side by side. No matter what decision came our way, Terry consistently deferred to me, never sharing his thoughts but simply agreeing with whatever I suggested. This pattern started making Terry's personality seem less dependable to me, and I began to feel less satisfied with our relationship. Another growing concern was my interactions with my mother-in-law. Unlike Terry's easygoing nature, she was quite the opposite. She was assertive and rarely took my opinions into account. From our very first meeting, she made her expectations clear. "Lauren, once you're married, you'll leave your job to focus on the household, right? You're not getting any younger, and if you wait too long, you might not have children. Terry is working hard, so as his wife, you should dedicate yourself to the family." Her views were staunchly traditional, insisting that while the husband worked, the wife should manage the home. What she didn't know was that I actually earned more than Terry. He didn't mind this and had even shared this fact with his parents, but his mother disapproved, saying, "A woman who earns more than her husband isn't endearing. Besides, can you even manage household chores?" Her words were condescending as she doubted my ability to cook, do laundry, clean, and care for my husband's health. Despite her harsh judgments, I knew I was fully capable of handling household responsibilities, having lived independently for years. I was determined not to quit my job after marriage, wanting to prioritize my aspirations just as much as Terry's. However, when my mother-in-law criticized me, Terry remained silent, simply nodding in agreement with her. This passive response made me question whether I could rely on him as a lifelong partner. Part of me wondered if Terry's youth was a factor, that perhaps he would grow into a more assertive and supportive partner over time. Yet there was also a fear that if this marriage didn't work, I might never marry at all. My mind was caught in a tug-of-war between anxiety and hope, and despite these emotional conflicts, the clock was ticking. With so much planning left for the wedding, choosing a honeymoon destination, and organizing time off work, the list of tasks continued to expand, adding to my stress. The unease kept building as I balanced hectic days filled with both work commitments and wedding planning. One day, I brought up our honeymoon plans with Terry, noting that due to our work schedules, we could only take a long vacation soon. "Should we plan our honeymoon during this period?" I asked him. "Yeah, that sounds good to me," Terry replied. It was fortunate that both of us had similar downtimes at work, making it our best chance for an extended break. However, there was a snag with our wedding planning. The venue I had always dreamed of was so popular, it was booked solid for the next year. "What do you think about having the honeymoon before the wedding?" I proposed. I had read that some couples chose this route. If we wait to have the wedding first, it could be another 3 years before we can take our trip. "If you're okay with it, Lauren, then I'm fine with it too," Terry said. While I was relieved Terry didn't object, his easy agreement made me wish he would express more of his thoughts. Although part of me appreciated the lack of opposition, I continued to move forward with our plans. Ultimately, we decided to spend our honeymoon in Europe. I was torn between choosing Florida, with its proximity and convenience, and Europe's rich culture. Eventually, I opted for Italy, enticed by the idea of strolling through beautiful streets and savoring exquisite food. I was also eager to explore local boutiques for stylish accessories and perhaps purchase some special tableware to celebrate the start of our new life together. After weighing various schedules and destinations, I finalized all the arrangements about a month before our trip. By then, my excitement was palpable. It was going to be my first trip overseas, and I couldn't wait to embark on this adventure with Terry, hoping it would bring us closer and perhaps encourage him to share more of himself in the future. The thrill of planning our European honeymoon completely captivated me. My days were filled with excitement as I busied myself selecting travel essentials and outlining our activities. This joy momentarily washed away any feelings of discontent I had towards Terry. However, just a week before our departure, Terry surprised me with an unexpected request, sparking my curiosity since he seldom asked for anything. Could it be something about our trip? Perhaps he found a new spot in Venice he wanted to explore. Eagerly, I asked him what was on his mind. Casually, Terry dropped a bombshell. "I want to go to Bing Taylor when we're in Venice. Mom really wants to see it." I was taken aback, bewildered by his words. "Your mother? Wait, what do you mean?" I struggled to keep up with this sudden shift in plans, but Terry acted as if it was all perfectly normal. "Well, since everyone else is going, we'll all be together during the trip, right?" "Everyone? What do you mean by everyone? It's our honeymoon, so obviously it should be just the two of us," I countered, but Terry continued, "My mom thinks it's normal for the whole family to come along." I was flustered. "Terry, I made reservations for just the two of us, and the deadline to book was a few days ago. Today is the last day to confirm. I booked for us alone. The whole family can't join now. If you think something can be worked out, you might want to talk to the travel agency." Before I could grasp the full implication of Terry's words, the intercom buzzed. On the screen, I saw my in-laws, bags in tow, completely disregarding my stunned expression as they entered our home. My mother-in-law's eyes gleamed with excitement as she exclaimed, "I thought I'd leave the luggage here since we're leaving soon." Terry chimed in supportively, "Just leave the luggage here," and began ushering them into the room without my consent. Panicking, I blurted out, "Wait a minute," as I tried to intercept him, desperate to regain some control over the spiraling situation. As I tried to process the sudden upheaval of our honeymoon plans, my mother-in-law shot me a sharp look, her tone dismissive. "What's the matter, Lauren? I hope you're not suddenly saying you don't want us to go together," she challenged. "I never agreed to this in the first place," I retorted, but she barely acknowledged my response. Instead, she turned to Terry, seeking his support. "You heard her. She just said no. But you always thought we would go together, right?" she coaxed him. Terry, seemingly caught in the middle, simply nodded and replied, "Yeah," affirming her presumption. Seizing on his agreement, my mother-in-law continued, overriding my objections. "It's normal for the husband's parents to accompany the couple on their honeymoon. Don't you have common sense? I hope you won't ruin this trip with any unpleasantness. We want to make good memories, right? I'll make sure to teach you some common sense this week before we leave. It's a special honeymoon after all." Feeling like the world was crumbling around me, my frustration boiled over. "This is a honeymoon, you know. Normally, it's just supposed to be the husband and wife," I insisted desperately, trying to make her understand the traditional privacy expected on such an occasion. However, my mother-in-law was unyielding. "The husband's parents joining the honeymoon is just common sense. I can't believe you don't want to be with us. I thought we were becoming a family, but it seems our ideas of common sense are different. You don't seem to like me and nothing seems to match. How sad, she lamented, her eyebrows furrowed in what appeared to be contrived disappointment. Her words dripped with insincerity, and I was certain she was manipulating the situation. Even Terry, without questioning the normalcy of the situation, sided with her based on her coaxing alone. "Lauren, what's wrong with you? They're my parents," he said, aligning himself with her narrative, leaving me to feel isolated and misunderstood in what was rapidly becoming a family versus individual conflict. "It's not possible for us all to go together on the honeymoon," I stated firmly. "We've already made reservations for just the two of us, and honestly, I've never heard of families joining a honeymoon." Terry's response was immediate and heated, his frustration boiling over. "I can't believe you dislike my parents so much, Lauren. That's enough for today," he snapped, disbelief clouding his features. As he spoke, a triumphant grin spread across my mother-in-law's face. It stung to see Terry consistently siding with his mother without considering my feelings, especially in such a personal matter. Before I could respond, I found myself being ushered towards the door. As it swung closed behind me, the last thing I saw was my mother-in-law's smug expression. Standing outside, I felt utterly powerless and wronged. Why was I being portrayed as the villain? Why did this special trip have to be overshadowed by such conflict? Overwhelmed by frustration and sadness, tears streamed down my face. A few hours later, a message from Terry pinged on my phone. "I want you to check if it's still possible for them to join the tour. If not, we'll cancel this trip and find one where all four of us can go. Please think rationally so we can sort this out properly." I was dumbfounded. His words implied that the fault lay with me, offering no room for apology or discussion. Terry had not contacted me since, likely upsetting himself. Time passed slowly, and soon the day we were supposed to depart for our honeymoon arrived. Despite my emotional turmoil, I had spent a month preparing for this trip and felt I couldn't just walk away. As I was getting ready, the intercom buzzed. It was Terry coming to pick me up. We hadn't seen each other since the argument, and I was unsure how to act around him. His arrival should have signaled that we were still going on the trip together, but oddly, he carried no luggage. Instead, he extended an envelope to me. It contained divorce papers. "After hurting my parents, you still planned to go on this trip, didn't you?" he accused. "I'm taking my whole family on this honeymoon." His words cut deep, leaving me reeling from the sudden, bitter end to what was supposed to be the happiest time of our lives. "If you don't like it, let's just get a divorce. My mom said it would be better that way," Terry said, shoving the divorce papers toward me. At that moment, his true nature was unmistakably clear. I had once believed that he would listen to my concerns and prioritize my feelings, thinking of him as a kind and considerate person. However, it turned out he rarely voiced his own opinions and consistently placed his family's wishes above mine. This was the real Terry. As this realization set in, my affection for him cooled significantly. Marrying him seemed more daunting than ever, and the thought of being part of a family with such a domineering mother-in-law felt utterly impossible. With a new resolve, I looked at the divorce papers he had thrust in front of me and said calmly, "Sure, but remember, I'm still single." "Single? What do you mean?" Terry exclaimed, taken aback by my response. "Weren't you paying attention? We talked about going on the honeymoon but delaying the official marriage registration until the day of the ceremony. I made sure to get your agreement on that, Terry. You didn't forget, did you? The marriage certificate is still in the drawer, and you even said, 'If you are fine with it, Lauren, then I'm fine too.' That's right, divorce or not, we're not even married yet. There's no problem with going on the honeymoon under my maiden name," I reminded him. Terry's face went through a whirlwind of emotions before he turned red and raised his voice in frustration. "Are you out of your mind to give up on marriage just like that? Just because of a honeymoon? Get a grip," I shot back, matching Terry's intensity with my firm voice. "This is me being rational. I've been so blinded by my desire to get married that I failed to see the reality of our situation. I can't be happy marrying someone who neither listens to their partner's opinions nor supports them. I'd rather stay single for life. Thanks for helping me see that haste does make waste. Hey, Lauren, let's calm down and start over, okay? Terry's voice cracked, his eyes welling up as he seemed on the verge of tears. But I was no longer moved by his pleas. I had made up my mind to break free from this cycle. Raising my voice, I told him, if you're so desperate for a family trip, go with your family of 3. But this time, you'll handle everything, from booking the tour to planning the itinerary. It's about time you experienced how challenging it is to manage all that on your own. If you think you can handle it, go ahead, you indecisive man. In a definitive gesture, I pulled out the marriage certificate from the drawer and tore it up right in front of him. His mouth fell open, stunned by my resolve. Do you understand how serious I am now? I refuse to have a future that's compromised. It's over between us. Why don't you go back to your beloved mommy and cry to her, you mama's boy? Leaving Terry utterly stunned, I slammed the front door shut. From his expression, he might very well go and cry to his mother. I could easily picture it happening, confirming my decision as the right one. After the fallout, I reached out to the tour company to cancel our reservations. Since it was a same-day cancellation, we were charged the full fee. I sent the bill to Terry for the entire amount. It seemed only fair since his actions had upended our plans. It felt like the right thing to do. Later, Terry blamed me for our failed marriage and even spread rumors among our friends and colleagues. However, it appeared that no sympathy was found in his corner. Among our relatives and co-workers, he started to be viewed as an unconventional mama's boy, a reputation further cemented by his recent actions, leading many to view him unfavorably. When I discussed the divorce with my parents, they were initially surprised but quickly came around. Marriage isn't the only source of happiness, Lauren. As long as you're happy, that's what matters, my mother reassured me. Her words were a balm to my spirit, and I couldn't have been more thankful. In a twist of fate, this whole ordeal reignited my passion for travel. I decided it would be a shame to let my vacation days go unused, so I embarked on my first solo trip. Traveling alone overseas was initially daunting, but turned out to be incredibly fulfilling. I explored historic cities I had always wanted to visit and found that being alone was surprisingly enjoyable. Emboldened by this adventure, I've fully embraced solo traveling. Whenever I have time off, I plan further trips. On my next break, I'm already plotting another overseas journey. This new chapter of my life is defined by freedom and discovery, a path where I am not constrained by anyone else's expectations or desires.